And I'm delighted now to introduce our first speaker, the chairman of the Public Utilities Rating Authority, Marissa Gillet. Marissa Gillet is chairman of Connecticut's Public Utilities Rating Authority, PURA, and began this role a year and a half ago. She took the reins from Katie Dykes, who went on to lead the Department of Energy and Environmental Protection. Chair Gillett serves also as one of Connecticut's representatives on RGGI, the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative. In her former life, she was the Vice President of External Relations for the Energy Storage Association, the national trade association representing the energy storage industry. From 2011 to 2018, Gillett worked at the Maryland Public Service Commission, where she most recently served as senior advisor to the chairman. She received a Bachelor of Science in Bioengineering from Clemson University in Clemson, South Carolina, and a Juris Doctor from the University of Baltimore School of Law in Baltimore, Maryland. While she has a law degree, she describes herself as a recovering engineer. I hope she doesn't recover too much. Public Utilities Rating Authority. Each of those 4 words means a lot, but it's the first word, public, that was the spark for this meeting. Chair Gillett actively seeks divergent voices and perspectives on issues within her purview. This focus on the public and on taking perspectives from all corners has led PURA to become involved in many issues involving energy affordability, how utilities reflect public goals in the COVID-19 response, as well as more traditional technical topics such as grid modernization, rate and tariff structure, storage, electrification, and so forth. At the end of this session, it is our hope and expectation that all of us will be grounded in the basics of PURA and how we, as advocates, can engage with it on clean energy priorities. With no further ado, I'm pleased to turn the session over to Chair Gillett. Chair Gillett.
Thank you, Bernie, and I have to apologize in advance because my jokes are nowhere near as funny as what we just heard from Bernie, as my poor staff can attest to. I'd like to spend the next little bit of this with you, walking through a PURA 101 to, as Bernie said, ground us in understanding how PURA works at a high level, and hopefully get you excited about engaging and participating in PURA proceedings as we progress into a discussion about my keystone initiative since joining PURA, which is our grid modernization docket. So I am going to start sharing my screen and take us from the beginning. So the title of today's session, appropriately titled Demystifying PURA. I think PURA suffers from the same thing that regulatory commissions suffer from across the country, which is, regulatory commissions are typically a black box. Energy and legal matters, especially administrative law matters, they can be hard to get your arms around. In addition to, the legal jargon, there's a whole host of day-to-day acronyms, and I think everything combines to make the agency not accessible to everyday folks, which I think is really we're doing ourselves a disservice, because I really admire with this group, what I understand this collection of group and folks to be interested in, which is creating groundswell from everyday people all the way up to large groups, because I think what we need to accomplish over the next couple of years in this state, if we're going to meet any of our ambitious targets, is everyone invested in modernizing our grid. And so I want to thank Clean Water Action, PACE, and the Live Green groups for inviting me and my staff this morning to speak with you. So if you're not familiar with PURA, I don't blame you for all the reasons I just mentioned. We're a small state agency. We have about 70 staff, and we have a pretty broad jurisdiction over electric, gas, water, and some telecom and cable, and that will become a little bit more clear as we get further into the presentation. I think sometimes it's almost easier to explain what PURA does by explaining what we don't do. So I'll get into that in just a moment. But the key takeaway and why it is so important, I think, for folks to hear some version of a PURA 101 presentation is because PURA, unlike the majority of agencies, we are a quasi-judicial agency, which means that the decisions that we hand down are legally binding. They're appealable to Superior Court, but it makes us unique in the sense that myself and my fellow two commissioners, we act as judges. So while it's not incorrect to think about PURA as, it's not entirely incorrect to think about PURA as a watchdog per se, we're actually more akin to judges. So we are bound by the Uniform Administrative Procedures Act, which is a lengthy and complicated set of legal rules, which most notably include prohibitions against ex parte communications, which means that the presentation that you're going to hear today from myself and my staff are going to be focused on things that are in the public record or have already been actions that have been taken by PURA to date. We're prohibited from engaging in substantive speculative conversations outside of a formal hearing process. And that's to ensure due process to all parties involved. You know, there are a number of different ways to express your viewpoint to PURA, and those are the things I'm going to hope to leave you with today. Because most importantly, as a quasi-judicial agency, any decision we make has to be based on evidence that is in the record for the specific proceeding. You can think about, like I already said, you can think about myself and my fellow two commissioners as judges. So we're not, by definition, supposed to be advocates, but rather ruling on what's put before us. So if I don't have a point of view expressed in the record from a party, I can never make a decision that goes there, which is why I feel so passionate about making presentations like this one to make sure that a range and diverse set of viewpoints is represented in the record so that we can reach a balanced decision that is representative of all interests that are in this state. So like I mentioned, sometimes it's easier to talk about what we don't do rather than what we do. So I'll just skip it. I'm happy to make these slides available so you can peruse them at your leisure, but we don't regulate a number of things that you might otherwise think we do. Like I mentioned before, jurisdiction over cable and telecom has been significantly eroded over the past decade or two as those industries became deregulated or our authority was supplanted by federal rules and regulations and preempted us. So we have limited jurisdiction in those areas. And in the water arena, while the vice chairman is a co-lead for the State Water Planning Council, and we do take an active role in the regulation of the two major water companies in the state, Aquarion and Connecticut Water, we don't regulate like the municipal water systems or things like that. We also do not have any jurisdiction over the internet or propane or any of the other things on this slide. So with all that said, we are always happy to try to help and to make the connection between, we still have regulatory contacts in a number of these companies, whether it's a solar installer or what have you. So if you're in doubt, you are always welcome to contact PURA, and that information will be in a few slides. And we can put you into contact with the people that can help. So what I did think would be important this morning, and this should be relevant both to those of you who consider yourselves more, previously connected to PURA, and those of you that are new to PURA, because the organizational structure of PURA changed significantly over the summer. After spending about a year, as Bernie mentioned, I took the reins at the very end of April 2019. So after spending about a year immersed in, regular Connecticut, I took the opportunity to reorganize the staffing structure to better reflect what I think our mission is and what our mission should be moving forward. And part of that was to create a division, a staff, the Office of Education, Outreach, and Enforcement, which is shown in the middle of the screen here, which is a public-facing group of PURA staffers. As I mentioned at the top of this presentation, the ex parte rules prohibit us from engaging with folks on matters that are pending before PURA. But we have created a group of about a dozen or so staffers that are essentially walled off from the decision-making staff of PURA, including myself and my fellow commissioners. But they are trained in the way that PURA operates. They have the substantive expertise. So because they are walled off from the decision-making staff, that makes them accessible to outside parties, ratepayers, individual staff. And there are a few functions that are embedded within that division that we think would benefit the public to have more ready access to PURA staffers. So we have a group that's focused on helping folks with licensing and certification. So that includes renewable generators. So if you are an individual homeowner that is installing solar, you need help understanding how to get licensed or how to get your solar project certified so that you can start generating RECs. We have staff that can help you understand the process and help you get that application through. The staff are, they have to stop at the line of telling you how PURA is going to rule on something or making any guaranteed outcomes, but they can take you all the way up to that point. And we hope that's going to be a service. There's also some lawyers down there that are dedicated to helping mediate disputes between homeowners or groups or towns and any of our regulated entities. So that could look like a vegetation management dispute. And then lastly, and this is the group that I think I'm most proud of, is we're creating an education and outreach function. So while myself and two of my staff are making the presentation today, we're training up a whole group within PURA that can create presentations and go out into the community on a routine basis to take PURA to the community. We just hired, we have a great new addition to our staff, Joe Cooper, who is, I believe, on the line today, who you may know from the Hartford Business Journal. He has just joined PURA, and he will join Taryn O'Connor, our Director of Legislation and Communications, to help make PURA's content more accessible. So we will provide their contact information, and we're always looking for ideas about topics for presentations moving forward. So the rest of PURA was reorganized as well, and I have two of those folks joining me today that are part of the management team. We reorganized to create a whole new office called the Office of Utility Programs and Initiatives that is focused on delivering clean and affordable energy and focused on reliability, security, and resilience. So this is in recognition of the fact that so much of our work is trending in the direction of modernizing our grid and working to cost effectively realize state goals. So like I said, we will get more into what they do later and happy to touch on some of these other functions. Like I mentioned, we have the Consumer Services Division in our Education and Outreach group. They help with mediating and resolving any complaints that you may have on a day-to-day basis. They're intended to help mediate disputes about existing law or regulation. So they can help with billing disputes, or if you have an issue with a supplier, or things of that nature. If you are looking more for an advocate on your behalf, there is a statutory agency known as the Office of Consumer Counsel, who is charged with representing all customers in PURA proceedings. So they are an automatic party in every PURA docket that we have. So I just wanted to make that distinction because there is, quite often confusion about whether you should intervene in a PURA proceeding, because, PURA, we have our own staff. And then there's this organization called OCC. There's also the Attorney General's office. There's also DEEP. So we do have parties that intervene in our proceeding, but they each have their own roles. PURA staff's role, for example, in a hearing is to help the commissioners complete the record, whereas the OCC's role is to represent what they feel are the interests of consumers. The Attorney General's assistant lawyers represent the AG, and DEEP is representing their interests. So there's certainly room in PURA proceedings to bring in other viewpoints. And there is a range of ways that you can engage with PURA. And I'm going to start from the side of like the most passive to the most active, I guess is the best way to describe it. So the first, the most passive way to engage with PURA is we do make all of our hearings are public. There are very few and far between exceptions where we go into a confidential session. We've only had 2 confidential sessions since I started a year and a half ago, and they're still publicly noticed, so you're aware that they're happening. But the overwhelming majority of our proceedings are public, and they are noticed on our online calendar. You can also sign up for email alerts, which doesn't require you to, make any formal filing in the case. It's just like getting a Google alert almost. So I've hyperlinked, some of those links here. In order to successfully sign up for PURA email alerts, you do need to know what the docket number is that's associated with the case that you're interested in. And docket numbers, like a court, is how we track our subject matter. We have anywhere between, I think we have around 200 active dockets right now. So while there is a way to just get all active dockets listed, it's certainly easier to know the number. So I've inserted the number of a lot of our hot topic dockets, if you will, throughout the balance of this presentation. So getting more into the ways of engaging with PURA that get more into the active, toward the active end of the spectrum. In every case that we have, we accept public comment. So whenever we have a public hearing or a technical meeting, we open and close with by pausing to see if there are any members of the public who would like to offer public comment. In addition, there are certain types of cases that we have where we have dedicated public comment hearings. Those come in like merger proceedings or rate cases, or whenever the commissioners think that something is particularly needs to be particularly flagged for the public, such as our upcoming next week. We have 3 days of public comment hearings regarding the storm investigations. To our, I wouldn't say I was surprised, but it was pleasant. I'm pleased that, one really positive thing that we've seen since the pandemic has started, and we've moved all of our proceedings to the Zoom platform, is I think we have seen an uptick in public participation. You know, in the past, we tried to make the public comment hearings at different times in the day and scheduled in the communities at like a town hall. And unfortunately, I wouldn't say that we had, record numbers of turnout. So with moving to Zoom, I think that's one thing that even if we do get back, or I should say, when we get back to, holding our traditional hearings in person, I do think that we will maintain the Zoom platform for public comment, because I think that has enabled more participation. Additionally, you can always submit written comments into the record by emailing the executive secretary and referencing the docket and the subject line. I should say that both oral and written comments to the authority carry the same weight, and they both become part of the public record. So I think it's really just up to the individual's preference as to whether you want to be heard face-to-face, or if you want to provide those comments into the record, because either way they have to be considered by the commissioners and our staff when we are preparing, to reach a decision. One thing that I will note, which is, certainly challenging for folks to understand, and I appreciate that, is when we hold public hearings or receive written comments, because of the way that we are structured, where, by law, we are bound, by these legal rules about ex parte communications and, due process. The commissioners, we are there to receive the comments. We, as the decision makers, unfortunately, we're not set up for a dialogue in that matter, but the importance of receiving those comments either orally or in writing is that when we review them in advance of an evidentiary hearing, when I or my colleagues cross-examine a witness during an evidentiary hearing, we can pull from comments that we've heard members of the public provide. We've done that to issue prompts for legal briefs and other things. So I want to emphasize that providing comments to PURA as a member of the public is important. We do read them, we do listen to them, and hopefully some folks who have seen that in the past have seen how we've used those in actual proceedings. Finally, the most active way that you can participate in a docket is to formally intervene and either become an intervener or a party. This is can be challenging because it requires to be represented by an attorney that's licensed in the state of Connecticut. That is usually where we see challenges getting to that level of participation. We have seen quite a number of towns and municipalities and groups like CCM and COST have intervened in our storm dockets, storm investigation that we have pending. And so it certainly can be done, and we are looking for more and more opportunities to enable that kind of participation. But when we are hosting a formal evidentiary proceeding, that's the process. We have modified our grid mod proceeding to enable folks to participate in a less formal matter where you aren't required to be represented by an attorney. And I will touch on that one in just a few minutes. So, there are other resources out there too that I just wanted to touch on. If you're not familiar with the Energize CT website, it is a website that is kind of co-hosted or co-managed by PURA and DEEP and the utilities. It has information on there about a number of resources, most notably, I think, the rate board which helps folks understand what their options are if you don't want to use standard service for your generation rates. There's also links to energy assistance and energy efficiency programs that are overseen by DEEP. So I just want to make people generally aware of that. And kind of close out this portion of the very high overview of PURA by saying, I want to thank folks for your interest in PURA. This is our general question slide. I'm going to transition pretty quickly into the overview of grid mod so that we key up the substantive part of that conversation. But this is my typical placeholder slide. So you have Taryn's contact information. We have kind of gone on a road show lately to do this PURA 101, and we've done some presentations on small cell siting and other things. So if you would like, to request a presentation for your town or your group, we are open for business in that respect. So I think if I'm looking at the time, I don't know if there are, Mark or Bernie, I'm happy to pause for, one or two clarifying questions before I get into the overview of grid mod, if there's anything in the chat.
Yes, we've got a couple questions. I'm going to read this first one carefully because I don't understand it. To what extent does the Office of Utility Programs and Initiatives direct or integrate the activities of the primary utility with third parties who may offer to seek commercial opportunities to own or operate aspects of the grid? For example, renewable generation or microgrids. I think that's you get between the utilities and commercial entities.
Yeah, so it's a great question. So the Office of Utility Programs and Initiatives was created out of this vision of what comes next after grid mod, and which we'll get into in just a moment. And PURA's jurisdiction is over the electric utilities and third-party suppliers. And we are trying through our grid mod process to set up programs that third-party, like the private market could engage in. But our regulatory hook, if you will, is always through the electric utilities. So we've dabbled recently in, modifying the Shared Clean Energy Facility Program. We administer the LREC ZREC program or oversee that to a larger degree. So it was in recognition that our grid mod initiative was going to create more and more of those type of programs. And we wanted to have a group that was dedicated to making sure that all those programs come together to produce a comprehensive vision and act in concert with and complement each other. Because, to be candid, I think that's one thing that the state has lacked, coming in from another state. I had a hard time understanding how all of the initiatives work together. So I think you'll see more of that as PURA winds its way through the grid mod initiatives, and hopefully the opportunities for the third-party market become more clear as we get into the grid mod conversation.
Excellent. Two questions. It's one very specific. It's difficult to sign up for email alerts if you're using a Mac. And I'll pair that up with a question. I think you are having a have had a website overhaul. When we have issues like that, call them technical issues. Is there a person that we can call for help?
Yeah, Yes, both great questions. So the entire state was directed to transition to a new template for our website. So when you go to DEEP or PURA or DSS, you should recognize some common elements between them now. So we transitioned to that template earlier this year. And in addition to that, with the onboarding of Joe and Taryn, who started earlier this year, we are focusing on revamping the content on our website too. So you'll see that kind of turnover over the next year. I think it was in sore need of being brought into this century. The other thing that we're doing is we're trying to launch by the end of this year a new back-end system that is the docket system. So our website, whenever you go to try to look in the actual case records, you'll recognize that you get kind of redirected to a different platform, which is a Lotus Notes platform, which is older than I am, and we're trying to transition to a new platform called e-filing, which will launch maybe later this month. Because of those two things, switching to a new website template and launching a new backend system, we are training all of our staff, but specifically our case coordinators and our docket control folks. So the executive secretary's office, if there are ever issues filing or accessing or signing up for email alerts, our executive secretary's office, he and his 2 staff are available to answer those questions. So that contact information is on our website, and I had his email, the pura.executivesecretary@ct.gov, but we can certainly follow up with that.